On the 23rd of April 2008, police in Copenhagen were called to a fire at number 7 Tiergarde Street. Due to the highly flammable nature of the materials contained in the flat, virtually everything inside had been destroyed by the time firefighters managed to take control of the inferno. When forensic scientists were able to gain entry to the premises, they found that the occupant of the flat had been in the process of assembling an extensive archive containing thousands of videos and paper documents filling 32 filing cabinets. From the organization of the archive, investigators were later able to ascertain that the occupant had been engaged in creating a comprehensive video catalogue of the inhabitants of Copenhagen. Files were arranged by names and by types, the archivist arranging different people according to criteria and category. The only piece of undamaged evidence, however, was a video camera secured in a box in the kitchen. The camera contained a tape of the last study undertaken by the archivist, which experts established had been made on the very same day as the apartment had been destroyed. City Hall records showed that a Madam Sørensen was the owner not only of the flat containing the archive, but of the whole block. Records also showed that she leased the adjacent apartments to holiday makers and other visitors to the city, and on inspection of the block found closed-circuit surveillance devices in each of the apartments from which she gathered material to make her research. Madam Sørensen was subsequently apprehended at a homeless shelter near Longbridge, where she had been attempting to write letters of apology to everybody in the city, though she had absent-mindedly used the hostel's headed notepaper to do so. She was taken into custody, where she was charged with arson, and cooperated with investigators without reserve. But when pressed for her motive, she was unable to explain her actions. Psychiatric examiners determined that she was defending a fixed idea. The surviving tape was later examined at the Institute of Film and Video Studies in Copenhagen by the senior lecturer at the Department of Post-Feminine Studies. It contained the last study undertaken by Madam Sørensen, whose subject was a Mr. George Longbridge and his daughter, who had rented an apartment from Sørensen on the same day that she had incinerated her archive. The subject was identified by passport images that were included at the beginning of the tape, which were in all probability stolen from him and later returned. By good fortune, the examiner of the tape recognized Mr. Longbridge as having been the keynote speaker at the St. George's Day Conference at the Institute of Film and Video Studies that same year. Partial footage of his speech was recorded on cell phone by a student at the Institute.
And it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you today's guest speaker and to deliver the St. George's Day lecture, Mr. George Longbridge. Thank you, Professor Sharman. I was hoping to present a paper today that I prepared for a conference at the University of East Anglia last autumn on the subject of independence in independent cinema, as I feel the particular need to re-evaluate the importance which we as a society and as individuals place upon independence. Specifically, are we to treat our independence as a stepping stone to commercial success? Are we to put a price tag on our independence? Or are we instead to recognise the value intrinsic to independence itself, a value which can only be appraised according to independence from commercial, normative, common valuations? And although I feel very much inclined to speak on this subject, I am instead going to share some of the thoughts which I had as I travelled around Copenhagen this morning with my daughter, doing all of the things associated with being a tourist. And I would like to do this in order to explore the notion of philosophical tourism, a notion by which we appreciate, somewhat aesthetically, philosophical positions as if on holiday, without commitment, without living with them, so to speak. And thus, if one were to wear this tourist identity as a disguise, as an incognito, then one finds oneself at great liberty to observe, to document, and to act without arousing suspicion. Now, to draw together what I said earlier in my criticism of philosophical tourism, of not living with philosophical positions, and this alternative idea of using philosophical incognitos and disguises, such as the disguise of the tourist, for examining philosophical positions critically, we can see at first glance that the relation between the two ideas is seemingly incompatible. For on the one hand, we insist upon reduplication of philosophical honesty. We insist upon doing what one says, in essence. But on the other hand, we insist upon duping, upon purposefully deceiving others in order to examine how genuine our position is. But if we look once more at these two apparently contradictory stances I have outlined, I think that it seems quite necessary to anybody deeply concerned with philosophical positions that one experiment with the idea of what honesty might mean to us, of what deception might mean to us, and moreover, of what identity might mean to us. For to be independent demands that one set oneself up against preconceptions, that one examines positions as if from all sides. And if this means that we must be both honestly deceptive and at the same time deceptively honest, then as individuals we must by default become entirely focused upon a critical individuality.
Investigators were keen to make contact with Mr. Longbridge in the hope of discovering a motive that could be pinned on Sørensen, but all such efforts proved unsuccessful. From investigations carried out by the Home Office in London, it seemed that there was no such person as Mr. Longbridge. The passports were identified as being counterfeit. In the final sequence on the tape, shot prior to her decision to destroy the video archive, Madam Sørensen followed the mysterious Mr. Longbridge to the famous landmark of Longbridge. George Longbridge then subsequently disappears from the footage to be replaced by this man, Mr. Damian Drahe. Mr. Drahe had been responsible for rebuilding the bridge after its original wooden supports were burned down during World War II, and many of his innovative fireproofing developments were implemented in the design. He was also known to many residents in the local area as being a great benefactor to people who had been made homeless by fire, and had distributed to charitable causes almost all of his personal fortune amassed through the development of fire prevention technologies. But despite his enthusiasm for preventing fire, and for his charitable activities aiding the victims of fire, there was a peculiarity in his nature that people were unable to explain. After having exhausted his wealth by the mid-1970s, he had since become symbolic to local residents for spending each and every day walking backwards and forwards across the bridge from sunrise to sunset. But despite the gossip, Mr. Drahe was in such a profound state of contemplation during his walks that it was impossible to extract from him what the nature of his fixed idea was. And he was thus classified by everybody as a lunatic. In light of the Institute's examination of the video, and in a final effort to obtain the motive needed to close the case, investigating officers resolved to ask Madam Sørensen exactly which of the events that took place on the 23rd of April had caused her to set fire to her research and her house. But a message received from Vestre prison explained that during the night, and apparently without explanation, she had spontaneously combusted in her cell. The case was never resolved.